Good evening. We will be conducting this evening's council meeting in person here in City Council chambers as well as virtually using Zoom. Members of the public may comment via Zoom. Please follow the directions on the agenda. Members of the public may also view and listen to the meeting tonight on Wave Channel 18 and online through the city's YouTube channel. Pastor Fred Benzel from Grace Life Church will be giving the invocation this evening, and Mayor Andriata will begin the meeting immediately after the invocation. So Pastor, if you'd like to come up.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the city council members for allowing us to have prayer. Let's pray. Father, we're so grateful today as we come together and as the council comes together to discuss things concerning our city and our community. We pray your divine wisdom upon them, that they make wise choices, wise decisions, Father, for the betterment of our community. We pray you would strengthen all of our city officials, Father, and give them divine wisdom for the days ahead. We pray for all of our schools, all of our community activities, our businesses, even our churches, Father, that you would bless and prosper, that we might be a land that honors you and that glorifies you. So, Father, we pray these things. We ask for your grace, for your provision, for your strength during this time. We thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Fred. Really appreciate that. All right, we have just a couple seconds. All right, it is 6 o'clock. So I want to welcome everyone, welcome the public and staff. Thank you for being here to the September 13th, 2022 regular meeting, City of Lincoln, City Council, Redevelopment Successor Agency, Public Financing Authority. 6 o'clock, call the meeting to order. Can we have the roll call, please, Ms. Scanlon?
Yes, Councilmember Joyner.
Here.
Councilmember Carlskent.
Here.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Here.
Councilmember Silhai.
Here.
And Mayor Andriata.
Here. Gwen, can we check really quick to make sure that we're not muted on Zoom?
So we are having some,
Some sound.
Zoom is fine, but the broadcast right now, we're having some
Okay.
issues, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, item number 3, report from closed session. Ms. Molikoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Staff received direction, but there is no reportable action, but we will be returning with an item for the council to consider in the near term.
Great, thank you so much. All right, item number 4, Pledge of Allegiance. Our friend Fran Nevis is going to lead us in the pledge tonight. Oh, that's all right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you.
So I will ask that council, please make sure you're speaking clearly into your mic so those at home who are watching the broadcast can hear us. Thank you. Item number 5, agenda modifications. Any? No? Okay. Item number 6. Oh,
Staff asked that one before.
yeah, for consent,
Right.
right? Yeah. You want it pulled completely or do you want it just for the discussion during
Yeah,
consent?
I'd just like to make a propose an amendment.
Yeah, so when we get there,
Yeah.
I'll do that. Yes, of course. Thank you. Okay, presentations, we do not have any. Item number 7, public comment. So we do have, public comment on non-agenda items. We do have one card and I'm sure there's other people. So Fran?
I'll just say I can see why nobody was sitting where I was sitting, because you can see everybody. I mean, everybody sees you there. Okay, I haven't been here a long time. It's really nice to see you all.
It's nice to see you too.
So my name's, this is really loud, or,
That's okay. Everybody at home needs to hear you.
okay. So my name is Fran Nevis. I live in 12 Bridges for 19 years. I love Lincoln. I belong to many organizations, including the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Lincoln Association, the Women's Club, the Native Daughters of the Golden West. We're members of the Friends of the Library, the Art League, the Area Archives Museum. Frank belongs to Rotary. the Knights of Columbus, and he's been the Toys for Tots coordinator or the assistant for 15 years. I've been a volunteer at Lincoln Christian Academy, formerly the Community Christian School, for 12 years. We are both members of St. Joseph's Church on Oak Tree Lane. And the reason I'm here tonight is because on August 6th, about 7:30 in the morning, there was a life-altering collision at Oak Tree Lane and 193. One of our parishioners was turning right into Oak Tree Lane, where he was hit by a big rig driven by a 19-year-old. You know, the county maintenance yard. And then there's an area where a lot of rigs have been bringing dirt in for several years. So they didn't make the turn. Consequently, our parishioner suffered brain bleed, collapsed lungs, broken ribs, spinal fractures in C6, T3, and T6, orbital fracture of his right eye, weakness in his left leg and arm. Tubes were put in both lungs. After being released from ICU, he was placed in a skilled nursing facility. And before coming home, his house will have to have an ADA bathroom and shower and bedroom on the first floor. Of course, the driver of the big rig walked away uninjured. The intersection is even more dangerous at night. Many parishioners won't attend night events at the church because it is too dark at 193, and about 2,000 people belong to the church. The church is open 7 days a week, so people are in and out of there all the time. When St. Joseph was built 15 years ago, the city required $250,000 for a signal light. The city was going to have the owners of the other two corners, which you mentioned in your consent item 8E tonight, for their portion of the signal when they develop their property. Several years ago, I also asked the city if that money was gathering interest. I mean, you've had our $250,000 for a signal light for 15 years, and I was told it was probably used for something else. So I don't know, I think you should be accountable for that money. After several years, also, several years ago, the city was considering a roundabout at that intersection. And that's why I'd really like to know if you're planning an intersection, a signal light, or a roundabout. I'm going to finish because, if you don't mind, it's just a half a minute. Another issue near there is the Lincoln Christian Academy, the school just before Oak Tree Lane. I asked someone at the city if a school zone sign could be there to slow traffic. At first, there was no answer. Then I was told because no one walked to the school, it didn't deserve a school zone sign. When you put the signal light at Oak Tree Lane, that will slow down the traffic for the school as well. The accident on August 6th could just as well have happened to someone entering the school property. I'm here tonight to ask you if you can give us a timeline on that signal light. There's already a stop sign on Oak Tree Lane. And I want to thank you for all you do for the city. And I want to thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. Sean, do you know what our timeline is for a stoplight at Oak Tree Lane?
Hi, Fran. So as you see on your agenda tonight, there's a right-of-way dedication decision that has, I think it's John L. Sullivan's lot, actually, on the corner there. I would say that it's going to be highly dependent on when the development occurs to the east side, southeast side of Oak Tree Lane and 193. But good news is that those applications are all in and moving along right now. And so I'll check with, the bigger question would be with the developer of when they intend to move forward in earnest there. And so I could probably give you a pretty good estimate, although a lot of it will be dependent on when they break ground at that location.
Thank you. And that was, I read all of 8E, and there was nothing mentioned about the intersection. That's why I wanted to come this evening. Plus, I wanted to tell you about that accident in case you didn't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Appreciate that. Okay. Is there any other public comment? Is there anybody on Zoom? Gwen?
We did have a hand raised. It looks like they dropped it. So anybody on Zoom, please raise your hand. No hands, Mayor.
Mr. Chapman?
Hello, Byron Chapman, 12 Bridges area over by where Fran lives. This is Mayor, council members, city staff, and those taking the time to either watch the meeting or in attendance here. My request regarding also a moving vehicle, but so much smaller than what Fran had shared with you. Approximately 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was over in the Foskett area. I know several people over there. And technology is terrific. It allows us to do so many things. And sometimes technology allows things to even shrink down as opposed to the monster piece of equipment that you might go for. What I'm basically getting to is the go-karts that are made today. Boy, I'm going back some years now, but when go-karts were in the day, oftentimes you're lucky if you could even get a motor on it. So you pushed it up the hill and flew down the hill and you go. That's kind of where it was. But today, society and technology has advanced that to the point where literally could have been a fatality. And the situation was this. I was at someone's home. I was in the driveway and they came out to talk to me to keep me from getting out of the van. And as I was sitting there, we talked for about 10, 15 minutes. And at that point, I said goodbye and started to leave. And as I did, the person that I was visiting there said, stop. It was just like, don't think about it. Stop. I probably hadn't moved a foot and a half. And in doing so, I said, what? And the person pointed to my left and I looked at this direction. And there were about 2, 3 houses from the corner of Jorgensen and I think it's El Camino Verde. And zipping by was this go-kart. Makes no sound whatsoever because it's all electric. Could not hear it. Couldn't even see it. It was that. And I pretty much give you and I'm probably underestimating the speed of this thing. It was probably doing every bit of 40 miles an hour and it was moving. Totally black. There was a flag on it, but the pole and the flag were black. But even with the flag on the public street, they zipped around the corner. I hardly even saw time for them to do that. My point is, had that person not said stop, most likely they would have been under the rear of my vehicle. I'm pretty sure it probably wouldn't have been my fault, but to have to live with something like that saying, wow, what could I have done differently? And I've asked myself that question. And the answer is, I couldn't do anything differently. My range of motion and looking back and the backup camera and all that stuff would have done me absolutely no good. Didn't even know it was there until it was gone. Well, I drove down the street thinking that hopefully that young man went to their place in their home. Unfortunately, it didn't. And I ended up stopping the individual and very basically said, you really need to do this. I turned it into the police department. And sure enough, when I went around the corner to go home, there were 2 other same type of deal, but they were white and they were flying down the street. And as I followed them, they went through all of entire Foskett at anywhere from 15 miles an hour to 30, 35. I got a hold of the police department. I talked to an officer there. They took pictures of that. And since then,
You can go ahead and turn that off when, wrap it up real quick, Mr. Chapman. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And so as I went over to see if I could also find out who that was, these 2 young boys were traveling faster than the cars in Foskett. And they're only this high up off the ground. So my point is, it may not seem like a big deal, but it could have been a horrible, horrible day. And I don't mean that may have happened once in a while, it runs the risk of happening every day. And apparently, I've talked to a couple of people there that I visit, and they've said they've seen those go-karts in and out of there like 3 times a day, 4 times a day. So I suggest that if the police department has just a little bit of time, or even the officers, the seniors that volunteer so they can see this, if you go there about 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon after school gets out, I guarantee you're going to see them. And that day literally could have been one of those days where it just shouldn't have to happen. I simply wanted to share that with you. And my last comment is, yes, the hot days for this point in time are hopefully gone for a while, and no more sunny skies. With that, thank you for my
Thank you,
listening.
Mr. Chapman. Chief Alves, I'm assuming you're taking notes on that over there? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any other public comment that are not on the agenda in the chambers? Did anybody raise their hand again on Zoom? Okay, all right. Thank you for that. Moving on. Item number 8, the consent agenda. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the city council or resident requests a specific item be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Any item removed will be considered after the remainder of the consent agenda. Staff has asked to pull 8G for a clarification, so we'll do that. Do any of my colleagues wish to remove any other items from the agenda? No? Okay. Any member of the public wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? No? Okay. Seeing none others, then we'll pull 8G, and I'll accept a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda, please. Okay, roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriotta.
Yes. All right. On.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I asked that this item be pulled just so that I could make a clarification and perhaps just have it in the record that, well, first of all, let me just explain. This is a request for a budget augmentation and change orders for a vehicle wash station at our Corp Yard. It's a project we're working on right now, trying to separate oils and greases from going into the storm drain after we're washing our vehicles. And it's kind of a complicated project. Anyway, as the pre-construction meeting had occurred and we had spoken to, or our engineering staff had spoken with a variety of public works staff and manufacturers of different equipment, it was determined sort of midstream that there was a better solution than the one that was proposed during design, and that is this, what you see in your report is this oil water separator. Will filter out 99% of that effluent, and that way it won't end up down at the wastewater plant. And so, but it's not really the details of the project I want to discuss. In the report, it correctly states that this was CIP Project 490. I want to just make it really clear that our intention is to fund these change orders from Fund 540, which is Capital Improvement Fund, and not from Fund 721, which is Wastewater Capital Replacement Fund. It's really a style decision or request in that there certainly is a benefit to the wastewater facility of not receiving oils and greases, and that they don't have to process them. However, this facility is truly a communal facility used by lots of different departments in public works. And so in talking with Nita, we both sort of agreed that it's more appropriate that be funded out of Fund 540, which is for capital improvement projects. That's sort of a pooled account to build facilities or infrastructure that serves all of the departments versus just one. So just wanted to see if, I don't know if Gwen, you got all of that, but generally. Other than that, we'd recommend approval.
Any comments or questions from the council?
Thank you.
Any comments from the public? No? Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve 8G.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint, Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriotta.
Yes. All right, thank you for that. Item 9, public hearings. We have 3 tonight. Item 9A, adopt resolution 2022-215, approving changes to the City of Lincoln master fee schedule for user and regulatory fee update. And so our finance director, Anita Racker, will give the staff report.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. And before we go too far into this item, and I request that you open a public hearing, we do have a presentation from our consultants at ClearSource, Terry Matson, and his associate Dave. Dave, I've forgotten your last name. Apologies.
Schroeder, it's okay. Good evening. So Nita, would you like us to share our screen?
Please, if you'll share your screen, and then you should be able to control the presentation.
So just to let you know, it's very loud here in the chambers, so you might not need to be so close to your microphone.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, my name is Terry Madsen, and as Nita mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague, David Schroeder. And we will have a brief presentation for the City Council this evening just to discuss the annual update of your master fee schedule. And we'll do our best to not be long-winded. Next slide, please. Just for the agenda this evening, we'll talk briefly about the background behind this master fee schedule as it exists today. We'll cover a few fundamentals and some terminology we use when we think about the topic of user and regulatory fees. And then David will close out with recommendations that are specific to the City of Lincoln. So briefly, the background is that the City of Lincoln, along with cities throughout the state, maintains a master fee schedule that identifies fees you charge for various city services. And we're thinking about services that are providing a service that's either requested by an applicant or required as part of an application or permit approval process. And you update and review these fees on an ongoing basis, and you so you're doing reviews ongoing, but you make updates periodically. The last time there was a comprehensive study of fees was in 2019. There was an updated fee schedule adopted at the conclusion of that study, but since that time, fees have remained relatively unchanged. However, since 2019, the region has experienced cost inflation of roughly 12%. This is common again through municipalities throughout the state are facing inflationary pressures. You have labor-related costs, you have increases in insurance costs, utility costs. So you do face inflationary pressures that we're hearing about in the media. Cities face them the same as households face those same inflationary pressures. Next slide. When the fee schedule was updated in 2019, there was the idea that there would be annual inflationary adjustments. However, sort of immediately after the adoption of the updated fees, the COVID pandemic hit and fees were left unchanged for 2020 and 2021. Now going into 2022-23, staff does recommend adjusting most of the fees in your master fee schedule by the most recent annual change in regional inflation of 3.21%. And so now, just as a reminder, when we think about these updates, in case it helps the council and the community that's participating in this topic, we think broadly about service-based user and regulatory fees that we're thinking of as providing a direct benefit. So as a city council, you have limited resource and you have broad community needs. So there's a whole bunch of needs identified, but you have limited resource. And so you try and figure out, how do I make the best use of that limited resource? And what we see in California is that communities are primarily using your broad tax revenues, like your general fund revenues, to fund services that provide that broad, general, community-wide benefit. We would think of this as like public works services, public safety services, park maintenance services. As much as possible, you're trying to fund those services that have that broad community-wide benefit, and you try and find a direct recovery for services that provide a direct benefit. Things like plan review, specific permitting, field inspections that are required as a result of development, those kind of things. And in most cases, we try and find a direct recovery to offset that direct cost. Next slide. Another important point to remember is that tonight's item does not examine the things that as residents and businesses we're most familiar with in Lincoln. So we're not examining taxes. We're not examining any assessments or like special assessments. And we're not examining our utility rates, like our monthly utility bills. And we're not even examining development impact fees, those fees that are collected to mitigate the impact on infrastructure that's caused by new development. We're really updating service-based fees that we most commonly think about would be like building permit fees, current planning fees like entitlement review, requests for review of zoning compliance, engineering fees, requests for permits to encroach in the city right of way, those kind of things. And then also your administrative items or non-development related fees like rec fees and general licensing and permitting. Next slide. So just briefly, the idea behind fees in California, again, this is common throughout the state. What you're doing aligns to your neighbors and to other cities in the state. And you primarily examine and update fees. You do studies periodically to ensure that your fees don't exceed your cost of service. In order to be fees and not taxes, we want to have alignment to our cost of service. But that idea of relieving the general fund as much as possible so that the available funds can be used to provide that broad general benefit. And then this final bullet that talks about the idea of helping to ensure that we can continue to meet the service level expectations of the community. So if we want to continue to provide certain level of service, we want to be able to recover the costs that allow us to continue to provide that service. We mentioned that the idea that what we're doing is examining user and regulatory fees. And so these types of fees, there is in 2019, the cost of service was calculated. So if we're providing a fee related service like field inspection or plan review, we calculated the cost of providing that service, and that information was used to make the fee adjustments and adopt the proposed fees. And so all that's happening tonight is an inflationary adjustment to that calculated cost of service. Next slide. When we think about cost of service, what we're really thinking about is, because these are service-driven fees, the primary driver is labor cost, and that can either be your own in-house labor or contract labor that you use to help administer services for the city. But it's a fully loaded labor rate. It includes salaries, benefits, uniforms, use of vehicles. It also includes a share of human resources support and finance support, city management support that is required as like this backbone support to allow us to provide the direct services that the community is expecting. So once we know what our hourly rate is, we think about things in sort of typical time. How long does it typically take us to perform something? If I knew I had an hourly rate of $150 an hour and something typically took me 2 hours to perform, I would know the cost of providing that service is about $300. If something only took me an hour to perform, the cost of providing that service would be $150. So that is the calculations that we've performed on behalf of the city. Next slide, please. And then once we know the cost, we can also think about this idea of cost recovery. So if we identify something as costing the city $300 to perform, we know that the city has incurred that cost. The only question is, how will that cost be recovered? And so will it be recovered from your applicant for service, your receiver of service, or will it be paid from broad community-wide revenue streams like taxes. And so if I have a $300 cost of service, but I only set fees at $150, then the remainder of the Lincoln community through our tax dollars is paying for the difference between the $150 that the applicant provided and the $300 that the service actually costs to provide. Next slide. And so now I'll turn it over to my colleague, David Schroeder, just to talk specifically, just some final comments about this sort of operational update that's happening this year.
Thank you, Terry. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Like Terry mentioned, we'll now wrap up our presentation with staff recommendations. As mentioned, for this update, most of the user fees are proposed to increase by 3.21%. This percentage increase reflects the most recent annual change in CPI for the region, and it's worth noting here again that the proposed increases are well below the 12% overall change in CPI since fees were last updated in 2019. And along with the CPI-based updates, we also have a few other refinements in the schedule to better align those fees with the services you provide, and also to update some restructured fees, including the city's business license fee schedule. As Terry mentioned earlier, because these are service-based fees, they're intended to offset the costs of providing the specific services for which they're charged. So for these user fee updates, there would be no associated fiscal impact. So what we're recommending to the council this evening is to adopt the resolution updating the city's master fee schedule. And if adopted, fee changes would go into effect 60 days from today, which would be around mid-November. Thank you, council, for allowing us to speak with you on this topic. This concludes our presentation. Terry and I are available for any questions or feedback you may have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to work with Terry and David at ClearSource. They've been very helpful, helping me navigate this first update since the major overhaul of the fees in 2019. Our intent is to bring fee updates on a more regular basis to this council, allowing us to do them on a more expedient nature. Since we hadn't done an update since 2019, we did an internal outreach to all of our departments to ensure we were meeting the department needs. And we found, as they alluded, that the majority of the fees were only increased by that CPI. We did find in speaking with some of our other departments that some of the fees needed to be adjusted in different ways. And two of those departments were the library and finance. The library actually lowered some of their room rental fees, and noting that the rooms hadn't been used on a consistent basis and hoping to encourage more usage by lowering their fees. So we'll evaluate that again when we come back to the council to revise these fees. And we also restructured the business licenses, as David talked about, and we've mentioned to this council previously as part of the restructuring of that business license ordinance. This is another step in that process, is bringing those fees in line with the new ordinance and the business classifications. With that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I'll ask the mayor to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Anita. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I think I do. As council, when we take an action on something like this, and I'm going to support this tonight, I think it's more than appropriate and overdue, obviously. But we trust that those updates that you recognize need to be done more frequently are being considered and being brought forward. So it didn't happen in this case. Is that a one-off because of COVID, because of the unique circumstances of that, or?
I think it's a combination of things, in part because of COVID. You know, the major update was done in 2019, but then an annual update didn't occur, due in part to COVID and due in part to turnover in this position.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Thank you for bringing it forward for a vote, and please do stay on top of it and bring it back as necessary.
Will do.
Am I to understand that when you surveyed the departments, there's 9% differential between what we would have charged had we done the 2 interim updates. Compared to what we're using, which is this year's CPI. That there was that they weren't impacted by the almost 10%.
I wouldn't say that. What I would say is that when we updated the fees in 2019, we gave the finance director the discretion to update fees annually to the CPI. And that's what we had contracted with ClearSource to perform at this time, is just that inflationary update. If we wanted to do a catch-up, we would need to do another full study, which I plan to do. I don't plan to do it in this fiscal year, but possibly next fiscal year. So we need to get on a regular cycle where we're doing annual CPI adjustments, and then so many years we're doing a big overall adjustment so that we can make sure we're keeping track, because just doing CPI adjustments annually, it can keep you in line with the inflationary adjustments, but in some cases that may not reflect the true cost of actually providing that service. In some cases, it may result in a fee that is actually higher than the cost of the service, and in some cases, it may result in a fee that is too low. So in order to ensure that we're charging the correct fee every so many years, we need to do an overhaul of the entire fee structure. But there were departments who were clamoring for that overhaul.
Well, okay. I'm trying to get a handle on what the subsidy is and what departments it's in.
Yeah.
And we don't, you obviously are not prepared to answer that tonight, but I think it behooves us to know what decisions are being made vis-a-vis subsidies and not when it comes forward next time.
Definitely. Yeah, and we, like I said, we may consider that large overhaul sooner as opposed to later, because I know that we, with the restructuring and change in personnel in the city and changes in the wage schedule that are part of the negotiations process, that it could be that we need to do that overhaul sooner as opposed to later. I'm just hoping to get through the financial system update first.
I believe also that just changes in the accounting system
Yes.
will make the task a lot easier. So.
Okay, right. We'll open the public hearing. Is there any comment on Zoom?
No, Mayor, no hands are raised.
Okay, comment in the council chambers, okay?
Thanks for the opportunity.
Hi, Ms. Curley.
Hello. I wasn't planning to talk on this. I guess I got so caught up with the development agreement topic that I didn't even catch this. But just a general question. I mentioned that the building fees and planning fees and other development fees were not examined, so I'm assuming that those were not a part of this adjustment. So what's the timing for when those are going to be adjusted?
So I think you're talking about the PFE fees probably.
PFE, anything related to development, building?
Yeah, so there are some development fees, meaning permitting fees that are updated as part of this update. The PFE is a totally separate and apart analysis and study, and the council's adopted that methodology, and we hope to return with those final fees in the next 1 or 2 meetings. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other comments in the council chamber or testimony? Mr. Chapman?
Once again, Byron Chapman. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff. Over the years, the city has been, I want to say, very, very good in trying to help nonprofit organizations with fees as things come up. 2 questions. One, in the regular budget, does the city put in numbers that may allow to, if something does come up, it wouldn't be as a hardship on the city if in fact the city said, yes, we'll take that under consideration. And the other part is basically for the programs that are for nonprofits. It could be a host of any. And I realize that it's a slippery slope when you say yes on this particular group that says we're doing this and it's nonprofit, as opposed to maybe not doing another. The city has usually worked that out fairly well, but I'm just wondering if in fact it's kind of like your own home budget. You've got a budget for them there, but nobody counted on the bad tire or the broken water main or whatever that might be. I'm just wondering if the city also has funds at least set aside to maybe augment some of that. And the other part is, if I do my calculations right, fortunately, the good news is, at least up until the last several months, maybe 6 months, fortunately, the inflation factor really has been at an all-time minimum. Fortunately, we're not running into this where the inflation has been in stride for 6 or 7 years, and now that's just going to bump everything up. So I don't know that that would change a great deal of what's going on, but I agree. I think it has to be out there, and even more so now than before because the inflation factor is really doing its thing. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chapman. Okay, any other testimony for this hearing? No? Okay, close the public hearing, bring it back to the council.
I was going to say, thanks for doing the study.
And I was just going to say, it's also thanks for doing the study, and also to staff, thank you for being so willing to work through on a forward basis, continuing to update what's necessary, work with our stakeholders. I know it's not perfect, and that I appreciate that we're working to get there, to get our processes nailed down. And I don't know that this is necessarily appropriate, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I gave the building industry a really, really, really hard time when the PFE came up, and they also weren't given a lot of notice on this master fee schedule. And I just wanted to say I appreciate the way that they chose to interact with staff and with council and making sure that their interests were met with, but not trying to, you know, I know it's not perfect and they're not super duper overexcited about it, but also understanding why we're doing it. And just really appreciated the way that they handled that and everyone's willingness to work together.
And I think that once we get on a more regular schedule with the annual inflationary updates, it becomes easier for them. They can expect for it, they can budget for it, they know when it's occurring, and that helps them regardless of, you know, the fact that the fees might be
Helps all of
going up.
us, right? So I appreciate everyone's willingness just to get there.
Comment. Anybody else? Okay, all right, seeing no more comment, then ready for a motion to approve or adopt resolution 2022-215.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Carl Skint, Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
And Mayor Andriata.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Nita. Okay, item 9B. Conduct public hearing and consider whether to waive first reading and adopt by title only ordinance 1054B, establishing a development agreement between the City of Lincoln on the one hand and Pappas Arizona LP and Pappas Gateway LP, collectively Pappas, on the other hand, for the development of approximately 44.13 acres of general commercial and employment center zoned, commercially zoned property within the 12 Bridges plan area. And if inclined to adopt the ordinance, staff further recommends the council make the finding the ordinance is exempt from further environmental review under California Environmental Quality Act. And City Attorney, Ms. Mollenkoff, will give a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. By way of background, as reported out already, Pappas owns about 44 acres of commercially zoned property in the 12 Bridges Master Plan area, as is depicted in Exhibit A to the proposed development agreement that is provided to you. The city and representatives of Pappas, who are in attendance this evening, have been negotiating for approximately 2.5 years with the understanding that the 12 Bridges Development Agreement was coming to an expiration in April of 2023. Pappas acquired a number of developer fee credits in 2017 and has since sold a number of those, but those were all largely residential, and the credits that they own currently are related to the commercial parcels that are for consideration before you. Pappas continues to hold these commercial properties with the intent to develop them in the coming years. We've all seen some of the work that Pappas has been doing out in the 12 Bridges area, specifically the Terracotta Project on 12 Bridges and the very popular Leatherby's location that has been frequented and loved and admired by many of our residents. And so during negotiations, Pappas presented a very compelling argument to staff that extending their commercial credits for water and wastewater beyond the life of the existing development agreement would have public benefits to the city that justify keeping the credit on the city's books for a period of time to allow for that development to progress. Otherwise, when the development agreement expires in April of 2023, it was the city's position, although refuted by Pappas in discussions, it was the city's positions that those credits would expire and then would be taken off the liabilities of the city's financial books. The California Constitution, as we have discussed in this chamber before, talks about a legislative body appropriating funds for which there is no authority or enforceable claim, but may rest upon a moral or equitable obligation. And payment of money by the city does not constitute a gift of public funds if there can be findings made supporting the public purpose exception. And in the staff report and ordinance, staff has tried to lay out for council points that we feel certainly justify extending the term of this agreement, and those relate to employment opportunities, reducing sales tax leakage, opportunities for local entrepreneurs, the ability to raise taxes to help the city meet its public safety obligations and the like. Pappas has also indicated that without the availability of these credits going forward, it will be next to impossible, if not utterly impossible, to develop this commercial area, and it will lay fallow for years to come. With the uncertainty of the availability of these credits for offsets, large retailers have been unwilling in some ways to commit to binding obligations for development, although there have been substantive discussions that staff has been told about, and there's continued interest, albeit no guarantees if this new development agreement is adopted. So the proposed development agreement that is before you is different, and it differs from the existing 12 Bridges DA in several ways. First of all, it is being updated to utilize the development agreement form that has been standardized within the city over the last several years. But more specifically, and specific to this particular DA with Pappas, it is specifically limited to only the commercial properties currently owned by Pappas in the 12 Bridges specific plan area. The term is only 10 years versus 20 or longer, which a lot of the development agreements are, with an option to extend one time for 5 years by giving 90 days written notice. However, prior to the extension of that term, Pappas is required to have pulled permits for at least 40,000 square feet of commercial development or provide the city with letters of intent from commercial tenants to build at least 40,000 square feet of commercial development. And if Pappas cannot meet that 40,000 square foot requirement, but does instead request the 5-year extension, their credit balance that is then on the books will be reduced by half. At the termination of the agreement, whether 10 years or as extended to 15, all developer credits will expire to the extent they're still outstanding. The agreement also converts the PFE credits currently calculated in equivalent dwelling units, which has been somewhat challenging for staff to track and follow, which is probably an understatement, as Councilmember Carl Skint chuckles. So with the update of the public facilities element, the credits will then be indexed at the same rate as the PFE. Ultimately, this does not have any impact on the value of those credits, but creates a more user-friendly environment for both the city and the developer when tracking the use of those fee credits and their value moving forward. And then finally, and also very importantly, based on the policies that have been communicated to the council by staff, Parcels that are not already annexed into a landscape and lighting district, a benefits assessment district, or a community facilities district must be annexed into CFD 2018-1, which is city maintenance services. And to the extent any of these commercial properties are developed as senior living or office professional and are not therefore generating the type of sales tax revenue we would like to see from this development, they will be required to annex into CFD 2018-2 for city public services. And so with that, staff believes that there are sufficient backstops that encourage the advancement of commercial development, allowing Pappas to make representations to continuing entitlements and also to entice commercial businesses to come and house their operations in the city of Lincoln, assisting with our finances, funding, job opportunities, and the like. And so with that, I am open to questions. I'm also going to ask the mayor to open it for a public hearing. And as I indicated, there are representatives at Pappas who are here tonight to speak and address to any more particular questions you may have about the plans for their development that they would be in a better position to answer than I am.
Ms. Mollenkopf. Does the council object to me opening the public hearing and hearing from the applicants? Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And if the applicants would like to step to the podium and speak, you may do so now, and then we'll take comments from the other public.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Jim Wiley with Taylor and Wiley on behalf of Pappas Investments. And here with me tonight is Travis Batts with Pappas and Mike Whipple. And we're happy to answer any questions. I do want to thank staff, in particular, your city attorney and city manager for working with us on this. I think we came up with a very good program that allows this project to be more viable in the market or remain viable in the market and be able to compete with your neighboring jurisdictions for commercial users. So we're happy to answer any questions now or after you have public testimony.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and take public testimony, and then if the council has questions. All right. Is there anybody with a hand raised on Zoom?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
Okay. Anybody in the chambers would like to? Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Once again, Byron Chapman. Thank you, Mayor, council members, and city staff. Two quick questions. One, if in the event that the city does approve this, one, are there any other scenarios out there, builders, developers, that would fall even close to this kind of scenario? So, which leads me to my second comment, which really is, does that set a precedence that isn't now currently in place for issues that may happen in the near future or distant future? So just like to make sure that that's covered with the city. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public testimony on this item? Ms. Ferlin?
Thanks again for the opportunity to talk. Got the agenda last Thursday, so I opened up to see what was going to be discussed this week. Kind of got a little fired up because I knew there was going to be a development agreement. I know the city hasn't done too well on development agreements when you look in the distant past. And I know that lately here for developers that we've definitely been not doing our job in terms of keeping the fees high enough. And I know we're making adjustments there too, so that's great. So I did go and I looked at the information, again, 66 pages, not a lot of pictures. And I read that this has been going on for 2.5 years. It's a complex process, obviously, 2.5 years, complex process, 66 pages. And I'm like, do I really think that my 3 minutes is going to change any minds? Because I also understand the council's been engaged throughout this time. So I said, okay, I kind of looked and I started to question, okay, this is called a public hearing, but I really question what the council and the staff would really be expecting from the public, given the circumstances that have gone on for this. So So I kind of set that aside. I saw the concessions, $4.2 million in fee credits were kind of my calculations. Those are going to go higher when they're adjusted. I understand. Certain connection fees for free, et cetera. Bottom line is I don't know all the negotiables. So it's hard for me to know really what's reasonable. But when I read through the negotiations, it said Pappas provided a compelling case that extending these credits have public benefit. But I didn't really see in the information any data that talks to that. I'm not saying there's not a compelling case, just didn't see any data. I did see all the other comments about, standard talking points about development, tax revenue, reduced leakage, et cetera. Again, I mean, I'm not dismissing that those are benefits, but we could say that about all developments. So what data is really specific to this development agreement that people are considering? So it's not a matter of making no concessions. Clearly, there has to be some discussion. I think it's just a discussion of how much. But instead of focusing on those details, I thought this is a great opportunity to mention two other points that I'd like to pursue. So I looked at Pappas Investments, and I read what the website is. And I've got somewhere where I'm going with this. It says Pappas Investments is a full-service real estate development company that takes pride in its role in building a more dynamic and successful community. More dynamic and successful community. So I said, well, how do I think you could help achieve that? And I thought, well, we just put in a new high school, 12 Bridges High School, home of the Raging Rhinos. I know it's a definite selling point for the area. And I know you'll give me a few more minutes based on previous.
Go ahead. Yep.
And it definitely should help Leatherby, Starbucks. I'm hearing Chipotle as well. Hopefully that happens. I'm kind of excited about that. So as you think about how your company can help our community be successful, maybe you can consider some valuable donations to the high school in the future. So just one thought. And then the other thing is, as you talk about building a successful community, I'd welcome the chance for you, our new community development director, and others to really sit down with the 12 Bridges community. That's the local community.
Take 10
there.
seconds, Mr. Crone.
Really sit down with the community to talk about what this all means to us as to how we together define success. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. All right, any others? No? Okay. Close the public hearing, bring it back to the council for questions or comments. Anybody?
No questions, just an observation that I think this has been hard fought on both sides. I think the resolution is a good one, a fair one, that creates an opportunity for a piece of ground that has sat fallow for my lifetime to finally be brought into production and to use for the 12 Bridges residents, for all of us. And I've got some ideas about what might be coming. I think we can all hope and pray for certain things, but I can tell you this, if anybody can pull those off, it's going to be Pappas. They are one of the biggest players in the entire region. They're working not only on their behalf, but on our behalf as well. And so I'm going to support this tonight.
I was just going to say, it's been a long 2.5 years, so I was pleased to be able to see it on the agenda. I think that it seems that we've come to a good place. I know it wasn't always, that's not where we started. And then also maybe just echoing, I hope that what does come on there brings value to our community. That's very important to me.
I was going to say, yeah, we do need the commercial development because we do need the sales tax. So we've been told before, but I think the grand jury that houses alone are not going to pay for our services. So we do need
along the lines what my colleagues have said. Sales tax, great. What I hope, and that is the choice of the people and the companies that you go after, help alleviate we have leakage that is caused because we don't have a type of business that causes people to go outside of town to get that satisfied. And while they're there, we leak more sales tax. So the type of, I'm not talking about the brand of gas in a gas station. I'm talking about the type of restaurant, the type of boutique or whatever is really important. And I'd like Pappas to really market the thing with stuff that will stop the leakage and generate sales. So I also would like our attorney to discuss the establishment of a precedent.
Happy to do so. My understanding is that this is a relatively unique opportunity. And so I don't see this as being something where there's going to be a lot of Me Too's that come along. But regardless, the city council has the ultimate land use authority within the city of Lincoln. And so Me Too doesn't matter unless the city council decides that they are bringing forth a project that presents a benefit to the community that they would want to grant such a similar benefit to.
You. Did you want to say something?
Just to kind of echo what she's saying is that, you know, the remaining commercial area in 12 Bridges is pretty limited and limited to this geographic area. And so I would struggle to think about other situations that may or may not have historic fee credits that would be able to make this case. I just think it'd be pretty hard to do. And also just as an aside, I've been very fortunate to work on a number of commercial projects in my career. And one of the things I've learned across all of them is that you have to do creative things like this to make them happen, or they won't. So I think that's just another consideration.
Thank you. Paul, did you want to add something? You look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, there are a couple remaining parcels, fairly small, the Safeway lot and John Jackson, different John Jackson's office project sitting back behind Walgreens as well. I think what I want to say is that the 12 Bridges master plan came forward with just that, a large master plan that intended for, and I'm going to bang on Safeway a little bit, intended for a grocery anchored center to be at the corner of 12 Bridges and East Joyner Parkway. Safeway acquired that property and has apparently no intentions whatsoever of building that, which puts the entire 12 Bridges master plan at some risk. So if there are opportunities within this to somehow satisfy that and frankly, tell Safeway to go pound sand on their desire to do a deed restriction and no longer permit any type of grocery to be there, then so be it. I think we'd all like to see a solution to that. I know that a lot of the folks in 12 Bridges would very much like to see some type of I don't want to call it just a grocery because there are many options that would fulfill those needs.
Good, thank you. Yeah, so to your point and to Mr. Curlin's point that we do want to see really cool things come to 12 Bridges to benefit 12 Bridges, but also it's a benefit to the whole community. It's not just 12 Bridges, just like Leatherby's is not just 12 Bridges, right? There's so many things that a grocery store or anything, there's, you know, the whole community can benefit. And so I really look forward to whatever plans that you can bring forward. And I also want to say thank you to you and to staff for gutting this out. It's been a long process. You know, we've all blood, sweat, and tears, but thank you very much for your work. Thank you for gutting it out and hanging in there. And it's going to be good, whatever it'll be. We're really excited about that. And so just want to say thank you to all of it. And that also that, just to reiterate what you said, it is a unique situation. This is something that's been dealing with for a while, so not too concerned about setting precedent. And so thank you for clarifying that. And so I just really appreciate the partnership, appreciate the hard work, and like I said, getting us to this place. And what I really appreciate about our staff and partners like you is that specifically with Sean, and I know he hates this, but that finding a way to solve a problem, finding a way to say yes and not just say no and walking away, is it's what we're stepping into in Lincoln, right? We're stepping into this new phase, this new era, whatever you want to call it. My thing is, it's a new day in Lincoln, right? That's what I say all the time. But finding a way to say yes, finding a way to solve problems creatively, like Sean said, and I really appreciate that about our staff and our partners. And so I'm ready to take a motion and support this if there's no other comments or questions.
I will happily make that motion.
Second.
Hey, roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriata.
Yes. All right, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 9C. Council conduct a public hearing and waive first reading and adopt by title only ordinance 1055B, amending Lincoln Municipal Code Section 17.16.190 regarding discretionary extensions for tentative subdivision maps to be consistent with state law, and finding the ordinance is exempt from further environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. And Ms. Vollenhoff, you're going to give this one as well?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
So this basically came to my attention at the request of several developers who saw the revisions of SB 9 and just said, you know, Lincoln, your ordinance is a little out of date. So it's really a relatively straightforward revision to our municipal code regarding the approval of tentative subdivision maps. So this would change, our current ordinance provides for its validity for 24 months. This would change it to 48 months, which is consistent with SB 9. And then it also allows the council to extend its approval for an additional time period, not to exceed 72 months. The ordinance originally said 24 months. If the application for an extension of time is filed before the current expiration date. And the applicant can request an additional 72 months or less. The council could grant less than 72 months. It would be utterly up to the council's discretion based on the project and based on the conditions that were sort of on the ground at that time. So with that, it is a relatively minor change, but again, it just brings our ordinance into line with what was recently passed with SB 9. And I think will assist staff and streamline the application for extension provisions. And, you know, Christian, I'm open to your comments on that as well, if you're interested in some input.
No, it's a great thing from the state of California. We don't often see things that are helpful in that regard. So this will definitely help us and make things smoother. So I don't know if we've discussed the other half of SB 9, but that's a little less so with the subdivision of single family homes. So this side is really helpful. So totally supportive.
Great. Yeah, this was a little easier bite to chew off than the other part of SB 9, which we're still kind of trying to muddle through, but that will be coming to you at some point in the future.
Do the council have any comments or questions before I open the public hearing?
My question is maybe this adjacent, so it might be a little non-germane, but with you saying it got brought forward because of being inconsistent with SB 9, how many other things are not consistent with current state law? And do we need to have like a whole overhaul? Because there's been a lot of revisions and there's a lot coming in January.
There have been quite a few. I think SB 9 is really the big one when it comes to subdividing lots and
But
single
this is
family
just one
residence.
part of
This is
SB9.
just one part
So
of
are
it.
we,
We're looking comprehensively at the entire
all
law
right,
and how
so
it,
more to come?
more to come for
Okay.
sure.
Along that line, in general, is it ever advisable or is it possible to write an ordinance that just references state law?
Right, the auto
So do you
updates, so
come-
we're not doing it every year
I,
because there's,
you know, what I said is advisable. There are some things I don't want my ordinances to match state law, but personally.
Certainly. And I mean, that is something we're looking at as part of our comprehensive review as to whether it makes sense to just say, you know, repeal this entire ordinance and say, you know, we will process applications consistent with this statute, government code section. So we'll be looking at that because honestly, even if we just repeal our ordinance, we're still subject to state law. So regardless of what our ordinance says, we're subject to state law.
But we can add other conditions in our ordinance.
But we can't make it longer.
We can't make it more.
Shorter.
Right.
Right. So if we're completely out of compliance with it, it would be easier to have our code streamlined so that it's just referencing whatever timelines they impose upon us.
Certainly, because the state has definitely made it clear that they are occupying the field when it comes to these issues. And so we can always make it easier for our residents. It would be very difficult and challengeable if we tried to make it more onerous or more difficult based on the law.
If we did that, it would make it easier for us, the staff level, right? It would just make it like a more streamlined.
1000%. I mean, in my previous role in City of Sacramento, they always tailored the state ordinances and tweaked them and made them kind of maybe overly complex in some ways. But in certain cases, we might want to tailor it to the city, but in lieu of that, just having it defer to the state is pretty seamless. Yeah.
So if we wanted to be strategic, we could, but otherwise.
Right.
Sorry to get us, I mean, this is somewhat adjacent, but I think it's also germane to like what we're approving and why and how. So I thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, and I just discussed actually the second half of SB 9 with some staff as I was going into this meeting and kind of like, where are we with that? And, you know, in lieu of not having our own ordinance, we can just defer to the state at this point, so.
Right, open the public hearing. Are there any comments on Zoom?
No, Mayor, no
Okay,
hands.
any comments in the council chambers? No, okay. Close public hearing, bring it back to council. Any final comments, questions?
Nope, move approval of ordinance 1055B.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yeah.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai, and Mayor Andriotta.
Yes, all right, thank you, Christine and Christian, appreciate that. Okay, item 10, general business. 10A, adopt resolution 2022-216 to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Hinder Leader de Lamas and Associates to provide business license administration compliance services for an amount not to exceed $127,000 over a 3-year term as a piggyback agreement to the RFP conducted by the city of Roseville. RFP number 10-019 dated January 15, 2021. And Nita, you are up again.
Evening again. So this is one of the final piece that staff's recommending in part of our overhaul of the business licenses, and that's to provide a platform that is more streamlined, more efficient, and quicker for business license applications and approvals for the businesses located within the city limits and also businesses that do business but maybe outside the city limits. HDL or Hindler de Lamas and Associates are one of the, I'm going to say, 2 large players within the state of California providing this service to various governmental agencies, many cities throughout the state. We believe that they will perform a great service to the city by providing a platform that businesses are familiar with other cities. They have the same platform but they seamlessly integrate it with the city's website. So when you click apply for business license on our website, it will take you to their platform. Well, they will be screening the applications, taking all the fees online, and generally just speeding that process. We want to work with them so that some of the applications will be on almost immediate approval, providing that license and certification to the businesses.
I just have one question. What does it mean as a piggyback agreement to the RFP conducted by the city of Roseville? What does that mean?
That within our purchasing ordinance, and it's very common within many purchasing ordinances for cities and counties throughout the state, is that we have language that allows us to piggyback off of another agency's RFP. So if an agency conducts an RFP for a similar service with a similar scope, and that RFP is within a certain period of time, I think ours is within 12 months, that the city, instead of having to go through an RFP process, can utilize that RFP and the outcome of that RFP to shorten the timelines and to bring to service to this community in a faster and more expedient way.
Perfect sense. Okay, thank you. All right. Any questions?
No questions.
Comment?
I just have a comment. And that is this is an extremely good idea. There's no, we don't have to worry about having somebody's time to do the management of it. It's like our alarm code system. By God, on the 15th of whatever month, I get the bill and the city gets money and it doesn't cost the city other than a small percentage. There are, I think we probably have, almost assuredly have a business license to teach, which they will be able to, with no work on our part, find and fix. So it's an absolute win for us for $47,000.
And you said in the report that the fees that they collect are going to help pay for this. Didn't you say?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, as part of our restructure of the business license fees, we included there is an overall administrative portion of that fee, and that will be going primarily to HDL to administer this.
Questions? Comments? Yeah, wonderful.
Hold on. I appreciate everything that you're doing to try to make things easier for business in the city. That's something that's been important to us, and I feel like we're finally making headway on it, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's our goal.
I brag on you all the time. All right, ready to receive a motion to adopt resolution 2022-216.
So move.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Carlskent,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
And Mayor Andriana.
Yes. All right, thank you, Nita. Okay, item 10B, adopt resolution 2022-217, consenting to the inclusion of property located at 657 Red Rock Road, La Quinta, in the California Statewide Community Developments Authority Open Space Program, authorizing the CSCDA to accept an application from the owner of the property, conduct contractual assessment proceedings, and levy contractual assessments on such property, and authorizing related actions. Our city manager, Sean Scully, will give the report.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Although I know the city council, because we are contacted very regularly by different PACE folks, know generally, I'm sure, what PACE is. Just for the public, I'll explain real quickly. The California Statewide Communities Development Authority is the largest JPA in California. And some years ago, it was founded and sponsored by the League of California Cities and also the California Association of County Governments, State Association of Counties, sorry, CSAC. And the idea at the time was to try to create a mechanism whereby people, businesses and homeowners could install energy efficiency upgrades on their homes and businesses, and create a financing mechanism that was relatively inexpensive and that would be taken directly from or assessed directly to the property each year. So it's, in other words, instead of paying a loan payment, you might pay to a HVAC company, for example. That total project budget is just put onto your property bill and you pay a supplemental assessment every year until it's paid off. So there's been over $4 billion in projects funded. Probably, I would guess it's been going on roughly 10 years now. And what you've seen in recent years is sort of a narrowing and scoping of a lot of these types of programs to really focus primarily on commercial and industrial projects, because that's frankly where a lot of the greatest need is. In this particular instance, I received a request from CSCDA and the property owners, the Gertons, who are developing the La Quinta del Sol project, to have the city council consider allowing their property to be included inside this PACE program, as they have an energy efficiency project they're scoping currently that includes, I believe it includes HVAC upgrades, windows, all of the things that go to hopefully reduce the overall power usage of the facility. And it'll be a pretty important component, from my understanding, to their ability to make their project pencil in the long term. And that's sort of indicated in the letter that was attached to the staff report. So aside from that, there's really not much to discuss. There's really, aside from me bringing this item forward, there's no fiscal impact to the city of Lincoln, and it provides a new, different kind of economic development tool for this particular property. And I'm sure we will get other requests for other larger projects in the future. And James Hamill with CSCDA, who is awesome and can explain anything that I missed, is on Zoom, I believe.
Thank you, Sean. All right, any questions or comments?
Just, I guess, a quick comment. It's in the staff report, but I just wanted to reaffirm and make it clear that our role in this, the council's role, is simply to consent to this. There is no obligation beyond that. We're not involved in the process in any way, shape, or form after that.
Yeah, that's correct. And also, in fact, it's even a step beyond that. Unless we ask, we won't even know what happens hereafter. It will end up sort of working through its way through the county tax collector's process.
Is this a particular program within PACE? Because why is it this particular property with the regular PACE program as it was? I guess the city at one time must have given approval, but then every parcel in the
So
that PACE program.
So there's been I don't know, over my career at least, I feel like there's been a half a dozen or a dozen different PACE programs. There was Hero back in the day, and then there's Y Green. There's been a variety of different ones. If James is on the line, maybe he can address why the request for this specific program for this specific parcel.
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so as Mr. Scully pointed out, the program has curtailed to more focused commercial and industrial projects, whereas 10 years ago, as Mr. Scully pointed out, that it was focused on residential PACE. All programs have really pushed towards commercial PACE, and what we have done as a program is go in and do individual approvals for projects rather than doing that on a citywide basis. It just provides more control for the city to ensure that the projects are providing a public benefit to your city versus just authorizing a citywide program as a whole.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions?
Nope, pretty straightforward.
All right, do we have any public comment? Any hands raised on Zoom?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
Okay, anybody in the council chambers? I'd be disappointed if you didn't have a comment.
And I guess my thinking is what I'd really like a sign on the property, a good sized sign that would let the community, especially the people kind of back who are buying homes, considering homes, understand that a hotel, a La Quinta Hotel, is planned for that area. I know right now it's not a legal requirement or code requirement from the city, but I think in the best interest of the community, who should really know what's going up around them. I think most cities have that sign language. I know, Sean, you and I talked about hopefully being able to get that into our code. But I think the city is looking at a lot of things, obviously, in terms of supporting this as a community-based public benefit project. I know earlier there was the incentive program for hotels that's going to result in, roughly $150K plus per year benefit for 5 years. So there's things that the city is doing. And what I'd like to do is encourage the developers to really put up a sign so that people know what's being planned there. So that as they're considering whether to buy a home there or not, they can make that decision based on all of the information that's available. So appreciate you giving that consideration. I know you can't mandate it because it's not in the municipal code, but I know the mayor, for example, knows the Gurdons. I know a number of you do. And I think really it'd be the right thing for the community, the local community, to have that and share that. And everyone's all excited about the hotel, or there's a group, not everyone, right? There's a group that's excited, they're supportive. So if they're that supportive when we're making the decisions to support it, then what's that next step to say, hey, we're proud of this. The city made this decision. Let's put up a sign. Let's tell the community, this is it. This is what we're putting here. Boom. And if people have questions or whatever, that's when they can reach out to the city for more information. So thanks for the consideration and for listening.
Thank you for the suggestion. Any other comments from the chamber? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, Mayor, may I? So previously with Ms. Hanson here, I had really a lot of discussions with her, and I was under the impression that we were moving forward with bringing forward some sort of language to include in our municipal code. We had talked before with her about having very clear signage on all of our projects, so anything that's under development, because people want to know. They want to know what's going up. They want to know where it is, and we had talked maybe building that into requirements on the developers so that the city's not paying for it, the developer is paying for it, and that it would have like a QR code on it so somebody could scan it and immediately be sent to all of the documents on the city website so that it's just open, transparent, easy. This is happening other places. It's not rocket science. It's super user-friendly. We wouldn't be the ones paying for it. It's a fair thing to ask. So since I only have like 4 real council meetings left, I'm like, have like a list of things that I don't want to be left off. So I'm going to hand this one off to Mr. Kirkland because I think that he'll probably be the most equally annoyed about it as I am. Because I think that it's something that our residents deserve. And I don't think it would be hard to implement. I'll get off my soapbox now.
So I agree with you. There is a challenge to that. There's been a Dutch Brothers sign sitting on a lot for a couple of years. That project is just now working its way through. So people feel deceived.
Well, that's where the QR code comes into place, right? If it has something that is always linked to active city documents, you see exactly where it is. Is it in planning? Is it not in planning? Is it pre-conceptual? What's it entitled for right now? It just gives people information. It might not be information that they are satisfied with, but it's what is real and what is happening and it's timely. I think it's fair bar.
Well, and so a few places that I've worked have had a sign notice requirement, a physical sign notice requirement. And then, a lot of cities kind of got away from it for some time, but in the places I've worked that have had it, we actually do tend to get more feedback as a result of someone driving by and looking and saying, oh, what's that? And so I think that there's probably a way where we could structure it with the QR code in addition to sort of timelines whereby, first of all, it doesn't go up 25 months before your project's going to consider because everybody's forgotten it by then. And it comes down pretty quickly thereafter. To Mr. Kurland's point, I'm going to mention that to the Gurdons, because obviously at this point, the project is approved as moving forward. I suspect that as they break ground, you're going to see construction trailers and fences with Lucky to Del Sol coming soon. But I'll mention it to them. Yeah.
Point though, Sean, if I'm a resident wearing my resident hat only, I don't want to be informed by like charades. Like I want my city telling me what's going on.
Yep.
A sign accomplishes that, not
We
a
just
graphic.
want to always make sure that when we are putting that notice out, that we have an actual reviewable project for somebody to get up and say, okay,
Yeah.
I like it or I hate it.
Yeah, so let's put parameters
Yeah.
on it.
Yep.
That we had, there was an absolutely beautiful, large, probably 16 by 20 or bigger sign on 12 Bridges showing beautiful graphic of the assisted living that was fully approved. Got a lot of people really excited. And the sign was still there 4 years later. It was a still approved project. it was, still fully entitled, and it just never went anywhere. And that raised expectations for people that were expecting to move across the street was a good deal. And so,
So schedule a discussion of what's appropriate and when to sign it and when to take it down. But I think within the wide spectrum of why we can't do it, there exists a reality of why we should do it and when, and let's do that.
it did get a lot of attention. And
And also, we're just going to keep, Chief just messaged it to me because I didn't even remember it, but we're going to keep pushing out this mapping tool that Jen shared with you, because I'm on it right now. And if you want to know about that project or any other one, it's pretty up to date. I mean, I'm finding things that were just filed recently, so we're just going to keep getting that out. We have to do a little bit of everything, I think.
All right. There's no other comments or questions. I'm ready to receive a motion to adopt resolution 2022-217.
I move.
second,
Roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent.
Yep.
Councilmember Joyner.
Yep.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
And Mayor Andriana.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay, item number 11, council initiated business. Any business? All right. Did you guys get the flyer for the Kiwanis Health Fair in October that I sent? I sent you the flyer on email. You guys asked for that?
Oh,
Make
you're
sure
going to
that-
sign me up to volunteer with you?
Yeah, okay, great. Just make sure you got that. All right? All right. There's no other business. Any information items?
I do. Does anyone else?
Oh, I
Kinda
will after you do,
skipped.
yeah.
But do they?
go for it.
All right. So I just wanted to report out from Cal Cities, and it was it's a special one for me because it's, like I said, I only have 4 council meetings left, but I've had the choice pleasure of being really involved in the league, both at the state level and the national level now for several years on the city's behalf. And so this last week, we went down to Long Beach for the Cal Cities Conference. I was required to attend. I've been on the board. So there's the way that it is divided is the state is divided into divisions. And so ours is the Sacramento Valley Division. There's 59 cities. All 59 cities now are members of our division. They weren't when I first got on the board. So that's kind of exciting. So we had our change of officers. So I came off, and I am really excited that Holly agreed. We had a meeting back in South Tahoe in June. And one of the members who is of the board, who's a regional representative, is going to be moving up to second vice president. And that's actually a council member from Auburn, who I recruited for the board. So Placer is really well represented on it, which I'm proud of. And then Holly is going to be filling that vacancy. So she'll be installed in January. But it makes me feel really good to know that I'm leaving it with equal voice for our city and for Placer. And I feel really strongly, and I would encourage Ben and all of my other colleagues, get involved in it. Because, so I'm going to back up 30,000 foot view. I write my career history. Like, I've worked for local government associations. I represent local government, but particularly at the association level, your input matters. And I think sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, it's a huge statewide organization and we're just Lincoln, except for that not that many people speak up all the time. The people who are in the room and the people who are at the table and the people who are making relationships with the people who are at the big table, those whose voices are echoed. And there's no way that Lincoln's interests or Placer's interests or the things that we hold dear, that those are going to be included in the direction of that organization that we pay into, unless your voices are there. And I think that at this particular juncture, that's more important than ever, because there's been a big shift in maybe the voices of local government, as evidenced by SB 9 that we spoke about earlier. Which means that it's really important to have people who are really passionate about local government and about their communities at the table to make sure that there's both affordable housing, but there's also land use, and that we're able to do it with discretion. So it's kind of a bittersweet thing. I know kind of went off on a tangent on that, but exiting the league, I was able to also be on a policy committee. I was able to meet in person with our policy committee. We've been over Zoom for the last few years because of COVID. Those deadlines are quickly approaching. Please apply. It's not that much time. They mostly meet like quarterly. Sometimes it'll be a little more than that. But those are the voices they take on legislation. Those are the voices that are impacting it. I know for me, when I worked in-house for an association, I'd put out like a request for feedback. I get 10 organizations telling me the same thing. I probably pitch it to my ledge committee. My ledge committee, my policy committee says yes. I'm taking that and I'm running that as my directive every time I meet with that senator, or I'm meeting on the floor, and I get amendments, and that's how bills are shaped. And it starts with us. So I'm going to be coming off. I'm coming off of the league too. I know we had a huge discussion on the National League of should we renew our membership? Please don't ever take that membership away. It was invaluable over COVID in terms of navigating ARPA, navigating CARES Act funding, figuring out how can we use it, figuring out how do we advocate for how we use that. Our voice was in that a lot. I would talk to the lobbyist who was over our ledge committee all the time. I was on the transportation infrastructure committee. We had a lot of input. We had input on how to try and get it to smaller cities for the community development block grants. I was constantly pushing surveys out and webinars to staff. I'm going to be coming off of that. The leadership applications for that are, I think, September 27th. They're coming up. Please apply. The policy committee deadline for that, I want to say, is November. Please apply. I would really hate for us to not have a voice on that. I think it's important. I know that sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, hey, it's someone self-aggrandizing themselves. Only if you go on those committees and you go on those policy committees to self-aggrandize yourself. If you go and you're wanting to represent your community, it made a difference. So I'm excited that Holly's going to be speaking up for us, and I would just really encourage all my colleagues to do it. It's important in local government right now. There's a huge shift, and I want to make sure we're represented. So I'll
Thank
stop
you for
talking
that.
now.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Dan.
I have one piece of information. And that's that the Western Placer Waste Management Authority bond issue went out, was more than fully subscribed, $110 million bond at a very low 3.7%, I think 3.77% rating. And the bond rating for WAPMA was 2 grades higher than we thought going in. So first of all, it says that that's a well-run organization because you don't get a AA bond rating. And second of all, that it's a good project, even though the genesis was forced on us by 1838 state legislation, that people being in the wider community think that we're doing the right thing from a technology standpoint. So it all came together. Their staff did an extremely good job and is passing some of the knowledge gained. That was a college education in 2 years for me. And that's how to get through this. It ain't simple, Charlie. And so we now have people in the county that have that kind of knowledge and operational knowledge. So I know some of them are working with us on the wastewater ponds.
Well, and thank you for all your work on that, Dan. I know you've been really deep dive into that, and so appreciate everything that you do on that committee. So yeah, so just to tag on to what Alyssa said about the League of California Cities, it was very productive. And so I am on the Sac Valley Division Board now. Alyssa and I met the new president of the league, and I'm going to be reaching out to him, and he said, I'll put you on a public policy committee. So I'm going to be doing that, getting involved with the National League of Cities as well. And so it's well worth it. And so in addition to that, Sean and I were able to talk to several different people and get information and contacts for things that will be beneficial to the city, things that we need, some different areas. And so I felt like it was very beneficial. It was very productive. And I went away from that just feeling good about the work that we did and contacts that we made. And so I'm looking forward to pushing into it a little bit more. So I was there. Yeah. And Alyssa was sitting on the side. Yeah. Well, and to your question about who stayed to vote, to Alyssa's point, the voting at the end about a resolution dealing with local control was kind of frustrating because the motion was to have a debate about it, and it kind of got shut down, and it's going to committee. And so that's why we need more people to be involved and to speak about local control. So it just, if I didn't already believe in that, and it just solidified, I was like, wow, that was interesting. So, but to be there to speak up and have a voice was important. All right, anything else? No? All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff, for all your hard work. Thank you, public, for being here, and we are adjourned.